everyone, and welcome to Seed Speaks. My name is Ashley Robinson, and I'm the editor of the Alberta Seed Guide. Today, I'll be acting as your host for this episode. So, the Farmer's Almanac and Old Farmer's Almanac are traditions that have been around for decades. Many enjoy looking at the forecasts that these books provide annually to see what the coming year will bring. But exactly how right or close to right are those weather forecasts? On today's episode of Seed Speaks, we're taking a closer look at whether you can really trust the weather forecast when it comes to the almanacs. And we have a few guests here to talk about this with us. So I'd just like to say, introduce Ray Schmitt and Steve Hu for joining us. We did ask both the Farmer's Almanac and Old Farmer's Almanac to take part in the discussion, but they declined. So I'm just going to introduce our guests here and let them speak about themselves. So first off, Ray, can you please tell me about your work at Salient Production?
Am I muted? Oh, hi. Hi, everyone. My name's Ray Schmitt. I'm an oceanographer, and I studied the water cycle over the ocean and its connection to rainfall on land. And in particular, some years ago, we discovered that if you looked at the variations in the ocean surface salinity with time, and you saw some patch of ocean get saltier than normal, well, that's because there was more evaporation and it exported more water to other parts of the climate system. And we found that we could use the variations in ocean salinity to predict rainfall on land. You know, if a patch of ocean gets saltier than normal, I guarantee you it's going to rain more somewhere else. And we found we could connect some parts of the ocean with places on land with about a 3-month lead. So I can look at salinity off the East Coast in the springtime and predict the rainfall in the Midwest in the following summer. And of course, that's a very useful thing for farmers. So we were doing a lot of research on that, but I also found an opportunity to enter a rainfall forecasting contest. And I have 2 sons that are engineers, and they were using machine learning to play computer games. And I got them to enter this contest. And lo and behold, we beat all the competition, which included professional forecasting companies. And we walked away from this contest with $250,000. And we decided to start a company that would help out farmers and, the energy sector in forecasting future weather. So at Salient Predictions, we built up a strong team of machine learning experts and meteorologists. And we're now providing weather forecasts at what's called subseasonal to seasonal timescales, basically 2 weeks to a year ahead. And we're supplying that information to the companies that serve farmers with all their chemicals, and also energy companies. What's the supply of solar and wind energy going to be in the future, and what are the heating and cooling demands that are coming up in the upcoming seasons. So some time ago, I took a look at the Farmer's Almanac forecast and did a little comparison with ours. I guess we'll get into talking about that. Over to you, Ashley.
Thanks so much for that. I didn't realize that was the story of Salient. It's quite interesting. Thanks for telling us that. And Steve, can you tell us a bit about your work at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln?
Yes, I am a professor here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and my background or training is in atmospheric science. So what I do here actually covers a broad area of 3 sort of categories. My work is primarily research. So my research is involving understanding weather processes, climate processes, what are the important processes that influence the subseasonal, seasonal weather, climate, and also some other areas of precipitation effect on surface and groundwater hydrology. And also I work with farmers. That part is related to my extension appointment. So working with agricultural producers in general, my goal was to engage as many people to spend time on or put time in understanding some available weather climate forecast information, and then develop skills to use some of them in their production decision making. So that's a very interesting work I have been doing for many years. Then I have the teaching appointments, so I teach some courses in atmospheric dynamics, some climate dynamics. So my goal is to understanding climate processes and using the understand and knowledge to improve our forecast, and then bring the forecast to users, particularly agriculture producers, to help them to make their production more resilient, let's say, to climate change and climate variation. That's my work. Back to you.
Thanks, Steve. So we're going to get into now the discussion. If anyone that's watching has any questions for our guests, please don't hesitate to type those into the chat box, and we may ask them live during the discussion. So first off, let's just talk about the nostalgia of the Farmer's Almanac and the old Farmer's Almanac. Like myself, I remember getting it as a kid. I grew up on a farm, and we get it in our stockings at Christmas. And it was one of those things that we'd sit around and look through and debate and be like, my dad would be like, oh, what's going to impact my crops next year? So what are each of your memories of the Farmer's Almanac or old Farmer's Almanac from over the years? Ray, how about we'll start with you?
Well, I did grow up on a farm, so I guess I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I think it's that basic human urge to know what's going to happen. So we all like to have a prediction, and when I look at the Farmer's Almanac, their forecast for this year, I think they're just sort of trading on the basic understanding of the seasonal cycle. So yes, it's going to be cold in the winter and warm in the summer, but I think this year both the two, the old Farmer's Almanac and the Farmer's Almanac, they both are overplaying the coldness. They have it cold and snowy, but what's actually looks like happening this year, there's this phenomena called the El Nino. You've probably heard of it. That's going to make the northern tier of the country rather warmer than normal. Yes, certainly there'll be the seasonal cold, but it's not going to be a very severe winter across the northern tier of the continental United States, as far as we can tell, because of the El Nino. The south will be wet, and the east coast looks to be pretty wet, but it'll be mostly rain. I don't think it'll be that much snow. I think it's a safe thing to say it's going to be colder, but I don't think it's going to be as cold as the Farmer's Almanac make it out to be this year. What do you think, Steve?
Or what are your memories of the Farmer's Almanac?
Yeah, Farmer's Almanac or almanacs were brought to me by my friends as farmers. So when I was working with farmers many years ago, I was shown this book. So that's old Farmer's Almanac. He showed me this forecast, the seasonal forecast for summer. So for summer or winter, they have many forecasts, seasonal forecasts there. So from that point on, I have paid some attention to the predictions made by old and Farmers Almanacs. I think there are forecasts. Well, forecasts always hard to make. I mean, accuracy wise, so it's hard to make a judgment what is how many seasons zero forecasts were correct, or how many seasons zero forecasts failed. So, but then the good thing I learned from interacting with farmers about farmers' almanacs is that they gave people some something to expect, I guess. Well, when you are in facing some future, would be nice to have something uh, told by some people. Say, hey, the road should be going this way, or should have a turn somewhere, so that the people would feel a little more comfortable to go that way, to feel, feel better for the future. So that's, I think, the main value of the farmers' almanacs to farmers, to their users, for the forecast part. The farmers' almanacs also have many other sections dealing with other things. I'm not very familiar with those things. So for the forecast part, I think it has helped farmers or users to have something to hold on to while planning their making their decisions or making their plans for the coming season.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I read online that they have these formulas, both the Old Farmer's Almanac and the Farmer's Almanac, that they've been using since they were like founded 100 years ago to predict weather, and they've updated them a little bit over the years. So, what do you guys know about how they predict the weather? Steve, maybe I'll let you start with this one.
Well, I was talking to a reporter of Scientific American a few weeks ago, and she told me that I have no clue. To be honest, the first thing I should say is that I don't know what formulas were used by those groups of people making their predictions or forecasts. And after talking to this reporter of Scientific American, I found that I know that they actually use some very old traditional secret recipes, secret recipes, to make their forecast. If you read the Old Farmer's Almanac, or Old Farmer's Almanac, this just published or recently published, you will see that they are saying that their predictions are made using the information from the sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets. Planet is not just planet Earth; it's planets, or it's a plural. So that means they use some other planets in this system, making their predictions. So, and also their formulas are secret. They're kept. Those formulas have been kept secret for 200 years. Like the old farmer's almanac has been over 200 years. Founded like in 1917, something 92 or something. It has been over 200 years. The formula has been there for 200 years, and they kept modifying or improving, adding more things to it. So those are their secrets, and I don't think they are. I don't think anybody else outside that group would ever have any information about how that formula, how their formulas look like, what they actually use in making their predictions. Secret.
Ray, what about yourself? What do you know about them?
Yeah, well, not much. They do seem to keep it all pretty secret. Um, they're probably looking at things like uh, the length of the hair on the woolly caterpillar, or what's going on in nature. I would think there are lots of old folk tales about how those things can predict future weather. Um, but weather forecasting has come a long way, and now we have a lot of very sophisticated tools to monitor what's going on in the ocean. The ocean is really the memory of the climate system, and one of the really important things that determine our weather is what's going on in the tropical Pacific. There's a pool of warm water that's normally off in the western tropical Pacific, and sometimes it moves to the east, and that really changes the way the weather patterns move around the country. And so recently, this year, a nice El Nino has developed, and that means the warm water in the western tropical Pacific has moved to the east, and so it's changing the way the jet stream flows across the continental United States. and the trend is for a warmth in the north, warmer than normal. I mean, it certainly will be snow. In places like Buffalo, we expect that the Great Lakes will take a long time to freeze up, because December is going to be particularly warm. Things will cool off in January, but if the lakes are unfrozen, that means a place like Buffalo can get some severe snowstorms, because the open water on the lake can evaporate a lot of water into the atmosphere, and then it dumps it all as snow on poor Buffalo. But other parts of the country, it's not going to be a heavy snow year in most places. The East Coast, as I mentioned, it looks to be quite wet, according to our forecast. And a traditional El Nino winter would have a lot of moisture in the south. And one thing that you should understand about the weather, as our climate is changing because of global warming, the atmosphere can hold more water vapor. And that water vapor, it causes a lot of problems in many ways. You get heavier rainstorms, stronger storms, stronger tornadoes. Warm water is really kind of fuel for atmospheric motion. And so that's what I expect to see. There'll be some storminess in the south. They'll have a wet winter coming up, and the East Coast in general will be wet, and the north will be on the warm side, warmer than average. What do you think, Steve?
Well, forecast has been made by many companies, including your company. I guess. Well, it's good to know your company. That's the first thing for me. I think if one is to make a weather forecast in the short range, like 1-2 days to weeks at most, that would be best to use some models like the what we have used. But then for longer range forecast, it's everybody's making forecast can be everybody's business, because as you said earlier, there are so many processes that can influence the weather pattern, the circulation pattern, which can cause weather to be different from one prediction. So that's I believe that's one of the reasons that there are so many weather forecasting businesses existing. They are making their long-term predictions, because when we get into that area, then the prediction is very much made by statistical relationships, statistical methods. So then in the statistical formula or their model, statistical model, what to include, like you mentioned, the sea surface, the water condition in the tropical Pacific. Some others would even consider the sea surface temperature in the North Atlantic Ocean or the North Pacific Ocean, and some other would put more weight on the jet stream locations, those things. So it's a very difficult business. It's hard, as you said, there are always failures for forecasts made by whoever is in this business, and there are also successful stories. So it's long range forecast is a very difficult to make, and it is very difficult to justify, to my understanding. You can make forecast in any way you want to, but then when you validate your forecast after the predicted season passed, then you will see what you won't be able to even explain why you are successful, why your forecast failed. That's a difficult thing. We won't learn from those incidents. So that's why this is a very difficult area for me.
Yeah.
Ray, is there anything else you want to add there?
Well, yes, Steve was touching on there are different ways to forecast the weather. And what our weather agencies do, like NOAA or the European Center, they run a big computer model of the atmospheric motions, the ocean and the atmosphere. And they're actually quite accurate out to about 10 days. And what happens is there are a lot of uncertainties in our data of what we know about the ocean and the atmosphere. We can only have so many sensors, so many satellite systems out there monitoring everything. And as you, what we call integrating the equations of motion forward in time, the errors, the uncertainties build up, and basically the quality of the forecast for specific, the weather on a specific day in a specific case will deteriorate. But they do pretty well out to about 10 days. So what we're trying to do with seasonal forecast and what's called subseasonal on the weeks ahead, beyond the 10 days of the dynamical forecast, we do use statistical methods. And those statistical methods have lots of uncertainties. And all you can do is talk about the probability of something occurring. So we can talk about the probability of a cold air outbreak. And what you hope to do over time is build up a process that gives you a reliable forecast, in the sense that if you say a given area has a 60% chance of warmth, every time you make that kind of forecast, you want to make sure that your forecast actually agrees with what happens. And it turns out that's a tricky thing to do. It's called reliability. And it's something that we here at Salient are emphasizing a lot. We want to make sure our statistical predictions are actually consistent with what actually happens. So we look very hard at our hindcast and adjust our models to make sure that we are providing reliable forecast. We're not, we're not going to be accurate all the time, but we can talk about the probability of an event occurring, and then check to see that in the past, have we been reliable?
Thank you. You guys just shared so much good information. And I guess it just really gets me wondering, why are people still looking at the almanacs and using them as a prediction method, or how are they still relevant when we have access to so much information in so many different ways? Like I can open a tab on my computer right now and see however many different long-term forecasts. So like, why are people still interested in these books that we've been getting for 200 years?
Yeah, I think it's that basic urge for help with making a decision. Farmers have to make lots of decisions about, what am I going to plant next season? When should I harvest my crop? Lots of decisions have to be made, and you like some help with making those decisions. And so people will look to any sort of guidance. And I guess people enjoy the folk tradition of the farmers' almanacs.
Steve?
I think farmers' almanacs are still popular is primarily because over the decades, century even, farmers have built their trust into these in these products, in their forecasts. One of them is so. I think it's important to have such a trust. If like you want to buy a piece of something, a clothes, you want to buy a clothes, and you want to probably first look for some brand. So that's why this brand business is brand name thing is so important. The same thing here. There are many. Well, in the old days, I would say Farmer's Almanac might be the only. I can't see that, but my guess is that those almanacs, at least 200 years ago, might have been the only forecast available to people who wanted to use some information to make a plan or something. So over the decades and even now centuries. Some certain trusts have built to use their products. So even though I'm sure people were at times were misled by their forecasts because their forecasts failed miserably. Let's use the example. But they learn something perhaps, or I'm sure they learn something. So next year, they will put some uncertainty factor in the forecast they receive from those farmers' almanac. So over time, you see, they have learned to use the forecast by building this uncertainty factor in it. And that factor is developed from their experience of using that forecast. So that is very important. That's the foundation for their trust in the forecast. I think the most important thing now most people, farmers or farming communities are still using the farmers' almanac or almanacs is because they have the trust there. The federal government, like NOAA and NASA, especially NOAA, that's a federal agency to issue official forecasts, weather forecasts. They haven't done enough to build such a trust among farmers for their predictions, and that's actually becomes a hurdle because you have to somehow encourage farmers to put more attention on NOAA's predictions, seasonal predictions, and less attention on the almanac's forecasts. And that is difficult because they already have the trust, they already have the habit or skills, I guess, most importantly, skills of using almanac's forecasts. So you want them to change to use a different product, they have to relearn, and so then there will be risk involved in this learning process. They are reluctant to take that risk. So that's why government issued forecasts have not been very, very popularly used among users, the most important users in the farming community. But the farmers' almanacs forecasts have been used pretty consistently over time. So I think the important thing, I think the basic thing is the trust. Farmers in generations have developed the trust with those forecasts. That's the reason I bet unless the government forecasts can show its accuracy better than the farmers' almanacs forecasts, and there won't be any difference for people to use the almanac forecast. They will still stick with almanac's forecasts. So that's my understanding of the reason why farmers are they are so enthusiastic about reading the forecast from almanacs, rather than we were trying to push them to use NOAA's forecast, long-term forecast, and it's not easy.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right, Steve. It's because modern weather forecasting has really only come along in the last several decades, especially for the statistical approaches to the subseasonal to seasonal forecasting. And if you have centuries of tradition use of the Farmer's Almanac, that I'm sure that's why people still use them. But all this satellite systems we have now to monitor the weather, all the buoys that are monitoring the state of the ocean. There's quite a bit of information now available, and a long enough record that we can build up these statistical models. And my company is in particular using the latest machine learning tools, artificial intelligence tools, to provide the best statistical forecast we can on these weeks to months ahead timescales. And I think it would be quite interesting if there were a way to do a kind of a rigorous test of all the Farmer's Almanac forecasts. That would be quite an interesting project for someone to do.
Definitely. You guys all made some really good points there. And I think that really touches on things that are core to agriculture. One, I don't know a farmer that doesn't have multiple weather apps on his phone. And two, I don't know a farmer that isn't stubborn in some ways and stuck with that tradition, especially like people my father's age. So those are, I think that completely makes sense of why the Farmer's Almanac and the Old Farmer's Almanac are still such important parts of the agriculture industry. But I think we could talk for this way longer, but unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. So thank you so much to Steve and Ray for being here. I really enjoyed talking with you guys. And for those watching, thank you for tuning in. And if you missed any part of today's live stream, don't worry, we'll have it available on demand on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And if you have any questions about the subject or ideas for future topics we should tackle, please send a message to Seed World's Facebook page or feel free to reach out to myself. And this is the end of the year. We're only a few weeks away from hitting 2024. So unfortunately, this is the last episode of the year for Seed Speaks, but we'll be back in January with another interesting season. So make sure to tune in then and find out what we'll be talking about. And Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you, Ashley.